Welcome to Rock Week and welcome to my studio where I record my music. Now we're going to have a look into rock. I would call it a short introduction, but it could take a while. I want us to go through some of the different genres of rock as it's progressed over time. So what is rock music? It's quite difficult to define, but it's a type of hard-hitting music that normally uses electric guitars, bass guitar, drum kit, maybe a synth or a keyboard, and a vocalist sometimes, but not always. And that sounds kind of simple, but rock's changed so many times and still changes now that I think it's good for us just to have a look at a few key points in the history of rock. So let's go all the way back to the 1940s, and rock music started to come out of blues music and also kind of country music as well, the popular musics of that time. And by the early 1950s, there were loads of artists popping up across America, such as Chuck Berry. But here's one that we're going to just hear a little bit of song from, and it's Bill Haley and the Comets. In 1952, he wrote a song called Rock Around the Clock. Now, I should just say, these early rock and roll songs that we're looking at, use a 12-bar blues pattern, so taken straight from blues music. You have 4 bars of your first chord, and then 2 of your next chord, then 2, then 1, then 1, then 2, in a pattern, as you can see in a grid that I'm going to pop up for you, that shows this song. Now the intro section that you'll hear, the first bit, is a bit different, then it goes into that blues. 1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock, 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock, 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock, we're gonna rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad rags on, join me on, we'll have some fun when the clock strikes 1. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. We're gonna rock, rock, rock till the broad daylight. We're gonna rock around the clock tonight. So that's a little bit of early rock and roll with that song there by Bill Haley and the Comets. Let's pop that back out the way for now. So let's jump forward 10 years from rock and roll to what they call the British invasion, where rock starts to happen in Britain. And by the end of 1962, this is kind of when it had started. And there were bands like the Searchers, Gerry and the Pacemakers, and you might have heard of the Beatles. And they drew lots of inspiration as well from the blues and also this 1950s rock and roll. And they initially started using American tunes, so the Beatles copied lots of tunes from American groups, and then they started composing their own music, incorporating these different fusions, so all these different sounds together to create high energy pieces. By 1963, the Beatles had a national success in Britain and were heading into the charts, and that was not just in the UK but around the world. They released the song I Want to Hold Your Hand, and it was the Beatles' first #1 hit in the UK and also other places. It spent 15 weeks at the top of the chart, and it was called I Want to Hold Your Hand. I'm going to have a go, add a little bit of that now. Yeah, tell you something, I think you'll understand when I say that something. I wanna hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand, I wanna hold your hand. So just a little bit of I Wanna Hold Your Hand there. 15 weeks at the top of the charts. And the Beatles became the greatest selling rock band of all time. Yeah, so great. So a bit later then came psychedelic rock, and it was popular around 1967, 68, 69, so late 60s. The Beatles again adapted their music to fit in with the music as it changed, and there were artists from all around the world, so there were the Byrds, Jimi Hendrix, loads of artists. Jimi Hendrix is quite well known for this. He was a guitarist. He was a left-handed guitarist, but there weren't that many left-hand guitar players then, so he actually had a right-handed guitar changed round, so it looks like he's playing his guitar upside down. So if you check out any of his videos, you'll see that. And there were loads of bands. So the Beatles, Rolling Stones, Jefferson Airplane, Pink Floyd, just some of them. I'm going to do another little bit of a Beatles song. Listen to the words. The words are peculiar in this, really strange words, and slightly unusual tunes as well. The intro for this originally was played on the sitar, so the Beatles are also taking different musical ideas from all around the world. Picture yourself in a boat on a river with tangerine trees and marmalade skies. Somebody calls you, you answer quite slowly, the girl with kaleidoscope eyes. So, the lyrics didn't necessarily make any sense, but I think there's some absolutely fantastic writing, especially in this song. Tangerine fields and marmalade skies. It's quite good to picture that. So, also in the, moving on to the 70s, Glam Rock. Now this was unique. Costumes, makeup, hair, all important. And from 1971 there was someone called David Bowie around. But he wasn't being David Bowie at this time during Glam Rock. He created himself a character called Ziggy Stardust. And all those different things, the makeup and the costumes and the hair, were all really important. And then there were loads of artists that developed this kind of style as well from all around the world. So Roxy Music, Slade and Lou Reed and Iggy Pop. And all of these different great pieces of music. And I'll be putting up a playlist of nearly 100 great rock songs through time for you to have a listen to. And you'll see some of that in there. Now, psychedelic rock. Let's go back to that and let's hear a bit of David Bowie at that time. Now, this song became quite popular when an astronaut sung it on the International Space Station. This is Ground Control to Major Tom. Ground Control to Major Tom. Ground Control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground Control to Major Tom. Commencing countdown, engines on. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is Ground Control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade, and the papers want to know whose shirt you wear. Now it's time to leave the capsule if you dare. This is Ground Control to Major Tom. Also, a similar kind of time was progressive rock. Music that kind of changed as it went on. So it started with a simple idea and got different, adding different instruments, different sounds. And one band that did that was Led Zepplin. They wrote a song. It's not really a rocky song to start with, but it builds as it goes on. And that's Stairway to Heaven, and it had a really iconic opening played on guitar. I'm going to play it on ukulele just so you can hear it. And music started to divide into two different ways. There was soft rock and hard rock. And soft rock was kind of came out of folk music a bit more. Used more acoustic instruments and more emphasis on the melodies and harmonies. And there were loads of artists that did this. Some of them, Carole King, Cat Stevens, James Taylor, who all kind of focused on the acoustic guitar. And then there was Billy Joel in the early 1970s as well, and into the late 70s, onto the 80s and beyond. And he brought the piano in. and kind of combined all those different ideas with a bit of jazz as well, so things like this. That's just a little bit of New York State of Mind, and that was Billy Joel. And then newly reformed with new band lineup were Fleetwood Mac, who started writing the songs that are probably quite well known today, some of the later stuff. And they were back to a traditional band lineup pretty much, with guitar, bass, and one of my favourite bass riffs of all time comes from a Fleetwood Mac song. You might recognise it. So it's about towards the end of the song, all the instruments pull out and there's just bass. Such a good bass riff. And the only one I'm actually going to look at in this video. But there are so many great bass riffs. Bass is an instrument that's kind of forgotten in the rock band. Most people think it's just there underneath, but it's really important, especially in rock. Now, alongside soft rock was hard rock. And it's such a contrast. It's kind of much louder, harsher, more intense, and uses electric guitar a bit more. The rhythms are much harsher, and they use lots of riffs and quite often a solo lead instrument and a heavy use of distortion. So up to this point most instruments have been quite clean, but now much harsher sound, a lot messier sound. And loads of different bands like the Kinks and Cream and Jimi Hendrix around still at this time. And then hard rock bands, specifically Queen, Thin Lizzy, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Van Halen. Here's a little bit, just a little bit, of an introduction of an Aerosmith song. Again, change the guitar sound slightly, just make it a bit cleaner. It was a bit too distorted. You might recognise that, and maybe a little bit of AC/DC. I broke the bottom string, so I can't play the rest of that riff, unfortunately. Need to get some new strings. But two fantastic little bits of heavy rock there. Pop that back safely. Around this time, out of heavy rock came heavy metal or metal music, and even heavier, more intense sounds again, and bands like Kiss. You need to check out Kiss, it's on my playlist as well, to check out some of their makeup and costumes, and Motorhead. Now, America had its own kind of heartland rock music, and it was quite simple in some ways, some of it, but such great songs came out. Bands such as, artists such as Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, Bob Seger, kind of singer-songwriters with their rock band, were coming out with some great songs, and more kind of folk, country, rock and roll feel to them. I'll do a little bit of a song by Tom Petty, just because I like it. This is I Won't Back Down, so you can kind of get a feel. It's played on guitar, and it sounds pretty much like this. Well, I won't back down. No, I won't back that's a bit of American music, a bit of American rock. And the genre reached its commercial and like artistic peak by the mid-1980s. Bruce Springsteen released the song Born in the USA in 1984 and was top of the charts all around the world. And by the early 1990s, this type of music started fading away. But in Britain there was something very different going on. 1990s brought Brit Pop. Brit Pop came from the alternative rock scene, so slightly different from what was popular, and it was influenced by 1970s and 1960s guitar music. Loads of bands came out at this time, so the Smiths, and Oasis and Blur, just to name a few, and there were loads of great songs. Blur and Oasis were having little competitions for #1 as well. Blur came out on top of that, but I'm just going to do, for my last little bit of song, a little bit of Oasis. Inside the eye of your mind, don't you know you might find a better place to play? You said that you've never been, but all the things that you see slowly fade away. So I start a revolution from my bed, 'cause I said the brains I had went to my head. The summertime's in bloom. Stand up around the fireplace and take that look from off your face. You ain't ever gonna burn my heart out. And so Sally can wait. She knows it's too late as we walking on by. They souls and lights away. I just like playing that song. It's really nice to play on the piano, and such a great arrangement of it as well that they did. So I've made a playlist, and it starts in 1952, and there's at least one song for each year from then till now that are great rock songs. So check those out. If you've got time, listen to all of them and you'll hear all those changes that I've talked about in this. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I realise it's been quite long, but it is kind of a good overview of most things that you need to know about rock music.